Okay, a bit of a controversial question. I know that's an awkward transition into this next part of the service, right? Pre-Thanksgiving or post-Thanksgiving Christmas trees? Okay, here's the vote online. I expect you to participate, and let's not get ugly in the worship center because people are watching us. Okay. All of the can't wait for Christmas. Now we've got rid of the Halloween candy, set up the tree, put up the lights. People, raise your hands. Here we are, right? We're the people who live in the joy of Christmas. Okay, now, totally unbiased. All those Grinches who can't stand putting up the trees so early and have to wait till after the turkey has been cleared, I pray for you. Okay, I pray for you. It's okay. It's okay. We love everybody, and we're glad that we have reached you with the gospel. Thank you for being here with us this morning. What about online? What do we have here for post versus pre? Just put up those two words, post or pre, and we'll find a way to make a count for that. We already know that all the pre-Christmas Thanksgiving people have won, but we just want to make the count official, okay? Thank you. I love Christmas. The number this year was 4,800 lights on the tree. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, it's a Herculean effort. I admit that humbly in front of a crowd of people. Thank you. My wife last year, we got rid of our Christmas tree. It was 9 feet tall, and it was artificial, and it was just dead and dying, gone. And so we got rid of that tree. We bought another one, and she bought one that was a foot taller. You know what that means, right, Ed? What does that mean? More lights, baby. That's right. Right out of Christmas Vacation, where he turns on the nuclear power plant extension and that whole thing happens. That's our home. There's a man back there that I can appreciate who loves a good Christmas tree. So next week, we're going to start something we have never done before at Faith Community Church, at least as lead pastor, right? And it isn't Celebrate Christmas, because we do that every year, and we do that with gusto. It's not just start a new series, because we do that all the time. We're going to go on a journey together. And I know that that seems a little dangerous under COVID times, but we're going to go on a great social distance journey together. It's going to be a long journey together. It may take us a couple of years to go on this journey together, but we're going to go on this journey because I really think God has inspired us to do it. Let me explain what I mean. So this summer, we're all trying to figure out how to live life with masks and distance and COVID infections and all that was going on. I really sense God say, and we pass this word on to our staff, redeem the time. It's a great way to live life if you think about it. Just redeem the time. For me, redeem the time became slow down. Not just to enjoy family, which I wanted to do and I did achieve, not just to cook some great food because it's a wonderful hobby, which I enjoy, but slow down with God. And so I did. And I made my time with the Lord in the morning very meaningful. I do something that people call devotions, right? Morning time with God. And when I do that, I have a structured way of doing it because I'm not a morning person, not till after my second cup of coffee. So the structure helps me through the time. But I always start with 10 blessings. Sometimes, the 10 blessings are as simple as things like I got a house, I've got a job, I've got clean water, I've got food, I've got a reliable vehicle, I've got access to medicine, right? I live in a country where I can worship freely, I have plenty of Bibles, I have good friends, and I have a family that loves me, and there's my 10 blessings. And then sometimes there are very specific things about the events of the day in the last 24 hours. Where I mention people's names, I mention events, I talk about the church, I talk about my family, insights in my relationship with God. Those are my 10 blessings, and I've been doing that for years, writing them down. It's inspiring to me, centers my mind. And then I pray God as I move into reading the Bible, and I reflect on that, and I always interact with it. I journal, handwrite a journal with the Bible that I have. And this year, I decided in June to turn to the Gospel of Matthew. And then I follow up with what I call prayer. And I use the word pray. I spend time praising God. I spend time reflecting on the things that I should have done differently over the last 24 hours of life. I spend time asking God on behalf of my friends and family in the church. And then I spend time yielding my life to God, going over my agenda and praying through it and giving it to the Lord for the day. And that's my morning time with the Lord. But the Gospel of Matthew was a place that really changed me. There's 4 Gospels in our Bible. They're all the story of Jesus from the different perspective of a different person. 2 of them knew Jesus personally, and were trained by him, Matthew and John. 2 others knew those who knew Jesus and recorded their thoughts, Mark and Luke. I love Matthew because Matthew is ground zero. Matthew is the type of guy, when he wrote his gospel, which, by the way, you know what gospel means? Good news. Every single one of them really felt that everything about Jesus was good news. And they wanted the world to know that. Matthew was a tremendous guy. Matthew was caught off guard by Jesus. Matthew was a guy living his life trying to make as much money as he possibly could, kind of bent the rules in order to do that, a job that some people thought was a compromised job with the government, right? He was a Jew living in his world, just trying to do his life and live it in the midst of very difficult times when Jesus shows up. And Jesus calls out Matthew from a crowd. Can you imagine being pointed out in a crowd of people by Jesus? And Jesus invites Matthew into a journey that would change his life. Matthew starts the journey with a party, and it revolutionizes his life. Jesus Christ so impacts Matthew, it changes his business, his goals, his ambitions, his relationship to wealth. Everything gets rewritten by Jesus in Matthew's life. Matthew goes on a journey with Jesus, and he's like late at night lessons and following Jesus through the day in the middle of the crowd, seeing the controversies, the impact and clash of Jesus with the religious crowds. Jesus reaching out and touching people's lives. He witnesses all of that. He hears from Jesus' mouth. He experiences things he can't explain. Ground zero. And then he's there at the cross. He's there when Jesus gets crucified. He's not at the cross, but he's right around that time. But he's there when Jesus comes back to life. And Matthew goes on a journey with Jesus beyond the cross, beyond the grave. Matthew is part of the development of the church in one of its fastest growth periods in human history. Right? And he's there when they're defining what they believe about Jesus. He's there figuring out how to do church. And he takes the call of Jesus and he goes off into the ancient world and he spreads the gospel. And our legends say that every one of the 12 people who originally followed Jesus, except for Judas, who committed suicide, and John, who we believe died of old age. So 10 of them were all executed for their beliefs, including Matthew. What happened with Matthew that would rewrite his life so to be willing to die for what he believed in? He tells us. He writes an ancient masterpiece of literature. A former tax collector writes a piece of literature that gets translated around the world into languages he didn't even know existed. People would carry his masterpiece to other countries, to other continents. They would study it and give their lives to the study of his work. Do you know that people kept and preserved it under religious persecution, under despots and destruction, through war, through famine, through great journeys? They'd preserve his work. They would tell it to people and explain it to people. You know that very educated people get into arguments over this. People in our day, they get PhDs one after the other, and sometimes just to study his gospel. We have taken portions of his gospel and we have turned it into posters. We have carved it into signs. We have memorized it to put it up in places to give us hope. That's how incredible it is. It's all because of the way he talks about Jesus. To Matthew, Jesus was remarkable because Jesus broke all the social conventions of his day. Jesus touched people that were untouchable because of their disease. Jesus opened up his heart and had conversations with people that were rejected and ostracized in Matthew's day. Jesus reached out to people and had conversations with them about their relationship with God, talking about God and the experience of God. And God was so evident in Jesus' life that Matthew wrote about it in stunning ways. I have read the Gospel of Matthew time and time again, but going through it this year has been eye-opening to me. Jesus is so remarkable. Matthew is unabashed with talking about miracles. We argue about miracles in our day because science says miracles can't happen. But I'll tell you, in Matthew's day, they were just as unlikely. And yet Matthew talked about these moments that were unexpected, inexplicable, fearsome, caused him to tremble. And this is in Matthew, says, look, I can't explain it away. I understand how you're going to take this, but I cannot not tell you about this because this was my experience. He talked about a Jesus who treated people with love and compassion and tenderness and honesty, and who opened up a God that was seemed as majestic and untouchable and transcendent, and brought him down and gave us permission to call him Dad. Matthew marveled at Jesus. He marveled at the one who had a single-minded mission. Jesus Christ was absolutely committed to reconnecting us to our Creator. Jesus suffered to do that. He died to make it happen. He went through death, bore our sins to reunite us with our God. And Matthew marvels at Jesus in the midst of this. And reading his account of Jesus took my breath away at times. Because Matthew lived in a difficult world. And as I describe Matthew's world, you may hear a little bit of our world in this. Matthew lived in a world of social unrest that would explode in violence. There were accounts in Matthew's days of mobs gathering, defying the government, exploding into violence, and people dying. Does that sound familiar? Matthew lived in a world of racism that distinguished people by their ethnic culture. They were clearly the us and they were clearly the them. He lived in a time of contentious politics where you felt helpless at the hands of a government that just didn't consider you valuable, or you saw infighting in the government. You think it's bad today? In Matthew's world, kings would kill their own children to maintain power of their throne. They were afraid of their government in their day. You know that there are people in Matthew's day that saw, as if reading the news, they just felt the world was coming to an end. They didn't know where God was in the middle of this. They were afraid. They felt alone and isolated. They just wanted to survive. Labored hard to make an income, to keep their family stable and together, and had to do ridiculous things that the government would ask them to do that made no sense whatsoever. They were just trying to survive. And they were asking, where's God in the midst of this? Because God had fallen silent to them for centuries. Does it sound familiar? As I read this and unpackaged this, I'm like, God, this is the gospel for the 21st century. This is what we need. Because Jesus' message is incredibly relevant. As you read through Matthew, you know what you discover? Jesus talks about sexual ethics. Jesus talks about wealth management. He talks about anger management. Jesus talks about racial tension. Jesus talks about how to manage fear and anxiety. As you unpackage this, Jesus teaches spiritual practices in new revolutionary ways. How to pray, how to be responsible to the poor, how to know God, how to be free of guilt and shame, how to not be afraid to die. How to discover God in the midst of the ordinary. Discover him for the day that gives hope and purpose for life. Matthew's story is about the birth of Christianity. And at its core was somebody he couldn't explain away, that he wrapped his life around, that he put himself in personal danger in order to promote, that talked about him in revolutionary ways, adoring ways. And as I read that and unpackaged it, I'm like, God, we need to do something with that. And so I really feel that what God has told us to do is in December, in the midst of the darkness of 2020, as we approach the shortest day of the year, in the midst of all that darkness, to start a journey with Jesus Christ. And to take us through a period. You know, we're in staff, you know how we're talking about 2021 into 2022? We're talking about that into the season of rebuilding. Churches all over America, we're talking about, hey, you know what? We've lost like a third of our people. We need to rebuild. And so we're going to do that. We're going to rebuild. We're going to rebuild with Jesus. As we take on next year, we're just going to start walking through Matthew. And as long as it takes, we're going to journey with Jesus through this season of rebuilding to find the hope that Christ brings in the midst of darkness. We start a new series that we call Experiencing Christmas at Home. We're going to do that with Jesus. And we're going to take a journey, and that journey is just not going to end until Jesus is done with us. And we're going to open up. You're going to hear us talk about Christmas Eve in brand new ways. What Pastor Dorian said, that was designed. We're designing a means of you helping to inspire hope into people's lives in a way we've never done before, because we have to do Christmas Eve differently. We have got to rewrite the way we do church in many ways. Not just us, but churches all over America have to do that. And we're just going to do that back at the beginning with Jesus, walking through it with Matthew, until Jesus does through us what he did back then. Reach the world with a gospel message that brings hope, life, and love to people who desperately need it. You want to go on that journey? Well, you know it doesn't matter, because I'm going and I'm driving. I'm driving the car, baby, and you're in the passenger seat, right? So let's do this. God, I just thank you that you have led us through an amazing synergy. And next week, you are taking us on another journey. I trust you to be in the driver's seat. I trust your hands on the wheel, your spirit to guide us as we move forward into 2021 and beyond that, rebuilding your church, Lord, for your season. You have been God of 2020, and you are God of 2021, and we will follow you through darkness into light because we trust you and we love you. Amen. Faith Community Church, God bless you, and we'll see you next week as we start this journey.